all of our fan mail was opened when we received it. So, not saying anything, but we didn't know, a lot of the fans would send cash. And we didn't know, were we actually getting it all? So anyway, so that's what happened. And we had a really wonderful time. And then at one point, they were doing Playmate Revisited layouts. And I did one at 54 years old in 98, I think. And of course, they dredged up mostly my old photographs, and I was much more modest at 54. But anyway, it was fun, and it was great, and it paid 2.5 times more than what they paid for the centerfold in 1963, none of which not a dime I got from the 63 one anyway, but I got to spend all that 1998 money myself, so that was fun. And I got a ton of fan mail. Oh, and the other good thing was, before that, they had wanted the Playmates to submit a story, a fantasy, an erotic fantasy. And some of the other girls, I guess they submitted, well, I went on the shoot and I would see so-and-so doing this with so-and-so. But being a writer, I wrote a short story, an erotic fantasy. And so they got excited about that, and they published it as the entire text for one of those glossy publications, one of their newsstand specials, and did a little bio on me, a little headshot, and, and all of that. So I was very excited about that. It was my first published writing ever. And I got paid exactly the same amount of money for writing without taking my clothes off as I did for the centerfold, $1,000 in those days, Playboy centerfold, $1,000 for the centerfold. I think, I don't know how much they were paying towards the end of the hard copies in 2021. But last I heard they were getting paid $25,000, for the centerfold. And I thought, boy, I sure missed out on that. But anyway, so we were just having a wonderful time at that point, and I just kept moving forward. And my mom died, my dad had died in 93, and my cousin died in 2015, and I started just I don't know what I was doing. I moved to a wonderful little neighborhood in 2000. And I reconnected with my high school buddies in Ridgefield, Connecticut for the high school reunions, and started gardening and walking my dogs, and working, doing some private duty nursing. Oh, I know. I had a little TV talk show for about 15 years, and started interviewing people who, survivors. I was really fascinated by not sexual assault survivors so much as people who had overcome adversity and how they had transformed their lives and taken their pain and turned it into something healing and productive, not only for themselves but for others, and had decided, how can I fulfill my dreams now? How can I just put the suffering to the side? What can I take from that? How can I use that to become a deeper, more spiritual, more enriched human being, and fulfill the potential God gave me, and have some time in my life that I'm not suffering, that I'm actually doing what I want to do, not what everybody else wanted me to do, or whatever slot people who saw me plugged me into. Oh, she's pretty, she should take her clothes off and be in the centerfold of a magazine that, she had never heard of. And of course, my family had disowned me when I became a centerfold in 63. So, I had all of that to deal with as well back in that time. So I learned to be independent and self-sufficient. I had to. I was a mother. And so jumping forward again into the 2000s, I was doing that. And then I was also very involved with the AIDS epidemic in the 80s as a nurse. I was a day supervisor at the first freestanding AIDS hospice in the country down by Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles. We had a 25-bed facility, and in those days, the guys didn't survive. I met a lot of interesting people who enriched my life and touched my heart, people who I carry with me to this day, people who I believe are with me always, and who I feel, along with my son, I have to make proud. So, you know, I just did a lot of, I opened my life up. I expanded my horizons. I opened my life up to utilizing the grief and sorrow that I had experienced and the suffering that I had experienced, and try to be the catalyst for other people to tell their stories. And having become a much more empathic person, I think, through working in hospice, I found that healing, you know, through service, we are healed. We get out of ourselves, and we can be with others as they're transitioning into the ether and help them sum up their lives. I became an ordained minister, not out of some spiritual journey necessarily, but it became that. I was helping out a girlfriend who had a marriage business, and I became an officiant. And I found myself really loving it, but not so much the marriages as somehow I wound up being shepherded into officiating at memorial services. And I loved that more than marriages. It was something about, there was something about summing up a person's life and celebrating that life, and just putting together this final celebration for this man or this woman's soul. And it really touched my heart deeply. So I did that for a while, and being me, I, you know, kept moving on doing other things because there's so many things to do, you know. And I was called to speak out about my experience with COSBY, which I had stuffed for years. I had been more traumatized by the loss of my son and the loss of my stepchildren, and having, you know, being utilized by my first husband for his own financial gain, that COSBY was the final blow. You know, it was the last straw broken on an already broken back at that point. But I stuffed it, and I never talked about it to anybody. I just swallowed the grief and moved forward. And when I left LA, I just walked away from everything and decided, close that book, open a new chapter on a new book. And so one day I was shutting down my computer, and I saw that a woman had told a story in the Washington Post about being assaulted, drugged and assaulted by Mr. COSBY. And I pushed it away because I just, I didn't want to know about anything from the past. I just didn't want to unearth all of the dirt and the pain and that, that feeling of being grubby and used and abused and, horrifically damaged. And um, so I had heard actually in 2005 peripherally on CNN that there was a woman who had come out about him drugging her and fondling her. And my daughter, my youngest daughter, and I just looked at each other and said, oh my God, that's a pattern. And that was the first time that it dawned on me that I wasn't the only one and that I hadn't gotten assaulted because I was just stupid and, took the pill. But I again pushed it away. And so in the end of 2014, it was November 22nd. And I remember 22nd because my son's birthday is the 22nd, and the 22s are always my favorite numbers, And so as I was shutting down the computer and trying to ignore Barbara Bowman's story, all of a sudden this pop-up on Yahoo came up about a Black comedian named Hannibal Buress, who was doing a stand-up routine in a nightclub in Philadelphia. And his line was, come on, Bill Cosby, you're a rapist. And it just was, whoa. And it had gone viral. And suddenly something just kicked me into high gear. And it was like this little red rocket went off from my gut and exploded in my brain. I can't really explain what happened or why it happened in that moment, but that's what happened. And suddenly I'm thinking, oh my God, who can I talk to? Who can I talk to? And I went back and I looked at the story and saw that Barbara had been written up in the Washington Post. So I thought about that. But I knew somebody that worked for People magazine, and I thought, well, I'll talk to him first. And I contacted People magazine, and then I went to bed. And I got up in the morning, and that was full in my brain. And I ran to the computer to see if I had gotten an email or any kind of response. Nothing. So again, I went and looked at the Washington Post article, and I went to the Contact Us thing, and I plugged in, I was drugged and raped by Bill Cosby in 1969. And not expecting to hear back at all. Within the hour, Adam Kushner, the editor, called me. And it was a whirlwind from there. Suddenly I was being interviewed. Washington Post, audiovisual, the article came out in the Post, and then they sent a still photographer and a videographer to my house. And then the Daily Mail, UK Daily Mail, was walking up my street looking at the photo shoot over the hedge. I thought it was a neighbor walking their dogs. Mm-hmm. They wanted information about a playmate who had committed suicide, Paige something, and I've forgotten her name, sadly. And then MSNBC arrived at my house, and then a limo showed up to pick me up to take me to Inside Edition. And then another limo came to Inside Edition to take me to CBS on the other part of town. And it just went on. And Al Jazeera and yada, yada, until the night, it was already dark, and we had started at 7 a.m. And I walked into my house exhausted, hadn't eaten. I think Al Jazeera gave me some soup. Oh no, Jim Murray at Inside Edition had given me a little soup and some tea when I got there. And but that was pretty much it all day. And I walked in, and I had left the television on for the dogs to keep them company while I was gone, and walked in just in time to see myself on the screen being interviewed, and the dogs looking at me and looking at the television where my voice was coming from. And they were just confused. And I was thinking, this is the craziest thing in the whole wide world. But it was so liberating, and it was so empowering. And I was so exhausted. I poured a big brandy, and I sat down, and not having eaten, it just completely knocked me out. And there I woke up in my chair, and I said, I need to get to bed and try to figure this out. And then the week started, and CNN flew me to New York. And then I met Barbara Bowman on CNN with another Cosby survivor, Jewel Allison, and Joan Tarshis, and one other woman whose name I can't recall. And it just was one thing after another. It just became a whirlwind. And we were on one show after another, and the Don Lemon special. And one week I was flown back. I got back from New York, and they turned around and wanted me to fly back immediately to New York, and for another interview. It was the most incredible experience that I just couldn't even imagine would ever have happened, based on just opening my mouth and finding my voice and exposing the predatory behavior of these wealthy, powerful, famous men who thought they could get away with it, who had a chrysalis around them that made them impenetrable, that they could do anything they wanted and destroy all of the lives. And I think the thing that really impacted me so deeply was all of the women who ultimately came out. 62 women came out about Cosby, but we each knew one or two or three others who didn't come out, who were too afraid for a variety of reasons. And they were completely authentic stories. And there was a pattern of fetishes and none of us knew each other, but the pattern of behavior was the same. Variations on a theme, but the same. And it was just so incredible to think of all of the lives that were damaged to preserve his life, his career, and his twisted sexual perversions. So I know so many of the survivors who are so gifted, so talented, whose lives and careers had just gotten started and believed in this good guy, Dr. Cosby, he was gonna, or Dr. Huxtable, the OBGYN that he portrayed on his show. He was going to make them famous. And as it turned out, what I learned from some insiders is that he made a lot of guys famous. Well, not famous, let's say successful, gave them successful careers, not just a one-time great gig, but entire careers were made for these guys for supplying him with an endless supply of females. He would drug them, and then what we understand, he would have a party. He'd call in his buddies, and they would have a party on this unconscious woman's body. And many of the women would wake up later back in their apartment with their car parked in front and have no memory of how they got there but would wake up bruised and swollen and sometimes bleeding anally. And clearly knowing that sex had happened on their bodies without their consent. So from the time that it happened to me in the 60s, his drugging became more sophisticated and his perversions expanded, and, you know, he became more empowered because he was getting away with it all. So there were a lot of other people I know that joined the party, and I'm sure that we have a similar situation in our government right now, which is why nobody's doing anything about it, because nobody else wants to be exposed, because they were probably all part of the party.
We had a huge TV star here called Jimmy Savile, and he got away with it for decades as well. He was like the most famous person in this country at one point, and he was hobnobbing with the Prime Minister, the Queen, the Pope gave him a papal knighthood. And there was, you know, his brand was worth so much. All of these people that complained about him, it was all covered up for decades, and it's absolutely sickening.
Yeah, and of course Prince Andrew.
And now we've got Epstein, Prince Andrew. We've done a lot of coverage on that.
Yeah.
And and nothing ever happens to any of these people. I think you touched on it earlier about how untouchable they are. I mean,
and the women are expendable, because after all, we're just furniture, we're livestock, we're property.
How did you feel when Bill Cosby got sentenced? And then how did you feel when they reduced and released him?
Well, I was right there when he was sentenced. I was in the courtroom. I was at every trial, and speaking to the media, because many of my sister survivors were unable to speak because they were in litigation. I was not, because my situation was very far beyond the statute of limitations. So I had the opportunity to speak all I wanted, and I could speak for everybody. Well, that's arrogant to say that I was speaking for everybody, but I had the platform, and I used it. And it was very healing for me. And I saw him walked out of court in handcuffs with his baggy pants and his baggy white shirt and his suspenders. And there was a brief moment when I felt sorry for him, because he looked so pathetic and old and pitiful. But then I saw this little smirk. And I realized in that moment that he was acting. He was thinking that he was going to get out of it, because he'd always been untouchable. Surely this was just a little glitch in his MO, his modus operandi. Surely this was just, a little scenario that he would, he'd go to court and, go to the police station and, they'd have him bailed out in a heartbeat. But then he was there. His sentence was 3 to 10 years. And in court, he was told that he had to, once he was out, he had to register any town he arrived in while he was traveling as a registered violent sex offender. And he said, before, it just shows the disconnect. He said, well, does that mean then if I'm only going to a town for one night to do a show that I have to register? He didn't realize that he was going to prison. you know, and he would sit there and rub his head and act sleepy and chuckle to himself and act like he didn't care what anybody was saying on the stand. Didn't mean anything to him, you know, he was fine, you know. His wife would show up and rub noses with him on occasion. And, you know, and she's complicit, obviously. She was his personal manager. She held the purse strings. And one of the women allegedly, or says that allegedly she woke up in the drugging with Mrs. being part of it. And we all wondered why Miss Winfrey didn't speak out, since she is a women's advocate. We were very disappointed when we discovered that she was Mrs. Cosby's best friend. So she did speak out once the Weinstein women became public.
Yeah.
Because then she could safely speak out at the Oscars, and it was very beautiful and wonderful and inspirational. But of course, the Weinstein women came out because they saw us come out. You know, we opened the floodgates of the second wave of the Me Too movement. And because we weren't beheaded in the public square, eviscerated, crucified, everybody else suddenly found their voice and they were empowered to speak out. And that just opened it all up, you know, Pandora's box. But in the summer of 2016, I became a founding member of a group, a coalition called End Rape Statute of Limitations, to abolish the statute of limitations on rape and sexual assault in California. It had only been 10 years, so those of us who had been assaulted prior to 10 years could seek no legal justice. So we gathered together, we carpooled up to Sacramento, the state capital. We lobbied, we testified in the Senate Committee on Public Safety. We rallied on the state capitol steps. We rallied on Hollywood Boulevard on Bill Cosby's star. We spoke out loud and clear. We had T-shirts with our aerosol logo on them, and we knew no fear at that point. And we got his honorary doctorate degrees stripped from him. We got many statues and honorariums taken down. We did a lot of good stuff. We harassed him in his performances when we could, and it was just the most grand time to feel. It was like once we were speaking out, we felt so light, like we'd been carrying this heavy weight around forever, like this infection, this pocket of infection with us, all these years that we'd just been working around as we move forward with our lives. And suddenly we lanced that boil, and all the infection poured out, and suddenly we were light. And we didn't even realize we'd been heavy. And that was I can't even find a word for it, But it was incredible. It was just incredible. We found so much empowerment and just joy. For the first time, I felt like I could move forward, and I was able, bit by bit, the layers started peeling off. And for the first time, I was also able to say I'm a multi-rape survivor, because suddenly I was with other women, other survivors, and they were saying it out loud. And I was going, gosh, I never even thought to say that out loud, to even admit it to anyone. I had never told anybody about the horrible 3 months that my first husband had sold me. And I was able to finally reveal that. And that was another layer lifted off of my soul, my heart, my spirit. And I started feeling clean, you know, and I started feeling like I could do anything. I could finally do anything. And I had been trying to write this book for 20 years. I don't know if you can hear my little one yipping in the background, my little dog. He probably needs me to pick him up. He can't walk.
Oh.
And he's in a diaper, but typical guy, he feels he has to stand up to pee. Even though he may have already wet his diaper. But anyway, so I have to pretend to walk him so he can do his little business. But anyway, so we just started, all of us survivors started picking up the banner. My sister survivor, Lisa Lotta Lublin in Nevada, she and her husband started getting a senator to write a bill, and they were able to extend the statute of limitations in Nevada to 20 years from 4 years. And then Heidi Thomas and Beth Ferrier-Tillow in Colorado, they did the same in Colorado. And then it just started, everybody started picking up the banner. And during the Cosby trials, we discovered that there was no legal definition of consent. And so Joyce Short in New York started writing a bill, getting somebody to write a bill for that and creating a legal definition of consent. And I can never remember it because it's a little complicated, but it's fully informed and mutually agreed, a mutual agreement anyway, fully informed mutual agreement. And that's not completely it, but close enough. And so she's been pushing that. And then in 2021, I think, former Senator Joe Dunn of California co-authored the Adult Victims Act that allowed a 1-year window in which we could file suit and find justice, regardless of the statute of limitations. But our bill went effective January 1st, 2017, but it wasn't retroactive. So the Adult Victims Act opened it all up. So I could then file suit against Bill Cosby, which I did. Unfortunately, there was a glitch in that particular bill in California that was not in the bill in New York, New Jersey, and Nevada, where it was also effective. And the year before, there'd been the Child Victims Act that allowed child victims of sexual assault to also file suit. And then the Adult Victims Act the next year. So anyway, I filed suit. The judge in Beverly Hills dismissed my case twice because of this glitch. And the glitch was this: I had to show that someone knew about what happened and they covered it up. Well, I never told anybody. And the other thing was that I wasn't an actor working on the set. I wasn't in the rehearsal hall. I wasn't in the audition hall assaulted like many of the girls were. It was in a private social setting. And I didn't tell anybody. And the actress that I was with refused to speak to the Washington Post. And she was also with William Morris Agency, which was the theatrical agency that Bill Cosby practically owned. And she had an agent go to the Washington Post, and they said, "We have decided not to speak about this issue." Well, I had lost touch with her, but I spoke to her in 1981. I had gone down to California for Christmas or something, anyway, in the afternoon. Late in the fall or something, to see my family with my children. And I thought I hadn't spoken to her since 1969. And I called, her phone number was disconnected. So I called William Morris and I left my number, and she called me back in about 5 minutes, and it was great. We caught up, everything was great until I brought up that night. And immediately she shut me down and told me I was negative. He was a wonderful person, a wonderful person. I was just being negative. And at that point, the conversation ended, and I had not spoken to her since 1981. And I found out after I went public about Cosby that she had guest starred on one of his shows in 1986. So apparently she had stayed in touch, and I don't know whether she complied or didn't think it was a big deal. Whatever, I don't know. I can't be in somebody else's head. But she has not reached out to me in the 10 years that I have become, probably the most media visible of the Cosby survivors. Me and one of the Afro-Cuban actresses, Lily Bernard. The two of us were in the front of the media the most. She was the young Afro-Cuban, beautiful actress, muralist, and I was the old blonde. And we looked good together, and we were both articulate, educated, and actors, and lived close to the studios, so we were easy to transport for interviews and in the front lines of the activism. So
Can I just read you something, Victoria, and get your thoughts on it?
Oh yeah, sure.
So it says on Google, Bill Cosby was released from prison because the Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned his conviction, ruling that he was denied due process due to a previous agreement with a former district attorney for immunity from prosecution. The attorney Castor had promised Cosby that his deposition testimony in a civil case would not be used against him in a criminal case, but his successor later used that testimony to charge Cosby. So how did you feel when this release, when he walked free after 3 years in the prison?
Well, of course, we were just stunned and shocked, and we rallied in Independence Square in Philadelphia. We all got together, and all of us survivors and Weinstein survivors and Catholic Church survivors, we all rallied and did a lot of stuff. NBC had us on talking about how we felt, the rug ripped out from under us, and justice did not prevail. But the backstory of that, Bruce Castor also was the attorney that defended Mr. Trump in his impeachment trials. He was the bumbling attorney. And he was the district attorney in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. And he told Bill Cosby that if he told the truth, and it was recorded, and we heard his voice in court stating what he had done, that he drugged women so that he could have sex with them. I mean, it was as plain as day, his confession. But Bruce Castor, whose father, by the way, was the realtor who helped Bill Cosby get his Cheltenham mansion in Montgomery County, it wasn't a written agreement that he wouldn't prosecute him. It was it was verbal. So when Kevin Steele, the DA, ran up against Bruce Castor, he used the fact that Bruce Castor had not prosecuted Bill Cosby as part of his campaign, and that Bruce Castor was not hard enough on sexual assault predators. And he won the campaign. There was only one of us, Andrea Constant, who was still within the statute of limitations of 12 years in Pennsylvania at that time. And she was almost up. And so Kevin Steele had to jump on that little window as quickly as possible in order to seek justice and open that case up. So once he did that, you know, I mean, it was a festive occasion for all of us. I mean, we were out in the plaza in front of the courthouse, and, you know, there were drums and, you know, people dancing, and, you know, also the Fat Albert look-alike with a bunch of homeless people who were being given T-shirts with the folds in them saying "Free Bill," and, you know, and it was the "Hey, hey, hey." I mean, it was a circus, literally. And but it was exhilarating. I mean, it was just absolutely exhilarating to see so much attention brought to such a situation that had been, you know, that dark, shadowy thing that nobody talked about, that you know, that you know, we lurked in the shadows. So to have that happen was just magnificent. And so to find out that it was overturned, he had appealed and appealed and appealed, and they kept turning down his appeals once he was in prison, because he refused to participate in the groups in prison for abusers. And ultimately, he wound up getting the appeal. Well, I was visiting my daughter in North Carolina at the time and heading to the airport to go home to California, and throwing stuff in the suitcase as I was watching this appeal hearing on Zoom. And as soon as I saw the justices, one of them immediately, I felt my predator thing go off in the pit of my stomach immediately. An older man, and then the woman justice, who said, "Oh, I just don't see a pattern here." And I thought, "You traitor." But what I understood was that they were using the fact that in the trial that convicted him, we had 5 of our sisters testifying. They were 5 prior bad act witnesses, and they were protesting that that was against him. You know, they shouldn't have brought all these women in saying that he had done the same thing to them. And we're going, well, how else do you prove a serial killer? You know, you bring in the victims, the prior bad act victims. And that's how we had to do it. And it was proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. So anyway, he got out just shy of his 3 years. And then he was talking about how he wanted to go back on his, you know, nightclub circuit and entertain and everything. And I don't know, he was going to speak out in, no, I guess this was before he was in prison. Never mind. No, maybe after. I can't remember. Anyway, we have this wonderful activist in Philadelphia, a woman named Bird Milliken, who was out there in front of the courthouse every day with a megaphone and signs and a boombox blasting "I am woman," and, you know, a bubble machine. And, you know, and she just, you know, had no reservations about saying anything, you know, to the press, and protesting and joining forces with us. And so he was going to go into a nightclub in Philadelphia and do a little stand-up routine. And I called her. I said, "Hey, we need a protest in front of that nightclub." And she, well, she said, and I quote, "Shitting my pants and pulling on my boots." And she was there in a half an hour with a megaphone, the bubble machine, and a boombox, and distracting people from going into the nightclub, and circling the club trying to find him with her megaphone, you know, and they snuck him out at the end, you know. But I mean, we just joined this group of women who came together with, you know, so much pain that wound up being transferred into so much joy and liberation and empowerment and enrichment of our souls. And it just took pounds of agony off of our shoulders and off of our hearts and souls. And we're still friends to this day. I mean, what wound up happening, we stayed friends, and, laws are being changed. And back to my case, we've withdrawn my case, and they had to write a new bill in California without that glitch. And so I just found out that it has passed, that bill has gone through the final committee, and it is now waiting to go to the governor's desk to be signed. And we should be able to set the trial date by January, this coming January.
Wow, well done.
Yeah. So to refile, let me say, not set the trial, to refile. Yeah. So that's pretty magnificent. So with all of those things happening, I felt inspired to continue writing my book, which I had been trying to write for 20 years and kept hitting a wall. All of a sudden, with the COSBY trial coming to such a triumphant end, that was before he was let out, I completed the book, because suddenly I had the missing piece of that story. And it just suddenly all came together, telling my story, as the person I had been as a child and what happened to me, and then ending with, COSBY and me leaving town and walking away from my recording contract and my life and yada, yada, and coming back later and, starting another life, my multiple incarnations, and suddenly it all came together, and made sense. And I published it, and I think it's a pretty doggone good book. And it tells the story of a woman that from objectification to self-actualization, and how you can transform pain and suffering into something liberating and enriching and fulfilling and healing, that you can heal. You can heal. It doesn't mean that it all is going to go away, but you can neutralize it, and you can turn it into something positive and help others. And that's where the healing comes in, when you can get out of yourself and turn it around and project outwards to others and help them through your understanding of the journey. So,
and it's such a powerful story. You've self-healed, you've transformed the dark experiences into light, and now you're inspiring so many other people. And good grief, what a journey you've took us on. I mean, people have been watching you now for almost 2 hours, Victoria. Is there anything you'd like to say to the viewers in conclusion?
Yes, I wrote and produced a play last year in Hollywood called Shiro, a tribute to my sister survivors. And it was a rebuttal to the media and the questions they asked survivors, the stereotypical questions. And it was a panel of 5 women, one woman answering the interviewer in a polite way, and the other 4 women as the Greek chorus, screaming what was really in her head. And then the final question was, well, now that you've spoken your truth and found your voice, how do you feel? What's happened? And then the lights go on, the black robes get dropped to the floor, and the lights come back up, and they're standing in beautiful evening gowns, and they're walking into the light. And my little god-granddaughter came out with a basket of rose petals and danced around them and tossed them. And then I sang my final song, which was, "Where was Roy Rogers when I needed him? Where was Sir Galahad? Where was Sir Launcelot before the onslaught, when knights in shining armor should have arrived? Well, they didn't. And I needed a hero. I needed my cowboy. I needed my daddy's wise words. Mama, you always told me there'd be only one. But Mama, I've been the only one. And then it goes into the refrain and ends with, I am my own hero. I am the only one. I am my only one. I am my shiro. And then all of my cast members started harmonizing with me at the end, and it was just magnificent. And former Senator Joe Dunn spoke. Jim Moray came from Inside Edition and spoke, and different leaders of different organizations against, the National Association for Sexual Assault of Children and, human sales around the country, and legal definition of consent. Everybody came and spoke at the end. And then I called all the survivors in the audience, if they felt comfortable standing up, to please stand up, practically the whole audience. And then they all came up on the stage, and my little god-granddaughter, because the stage was the same level as the audience, so I separated with galvanized steel buckets and white roses. And so she took a white rose to all the survivors in the audience. And then they all came up on stage, and we did a big photo op, and it was just absolutely triumphant. It was absolutely triumphant.
Oh, absolute congratulations to you. You're a wonderful soul. And all of your links are in the description box if the viewers are watching this on repeat. The website, the book links, I'm putting them in the live chat now. Huge thank you for just coming on and just blowing us away with the story. It's so inspirational, Victoria.
Thank
you. I'm gonna let you go so you can tend your dog, and I'm gonna close the show. But if there's anything ever we can do to help you from this side of the world, you please let us know. And thank you again. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Sean, and thank you so much for having me. And it was wonderful being able to meet you and share my story. There is healing. There is healing on the other side, and buy my book.
Definitely. Privilege and an honor. Take care. Take care of the dog. We'll see you later. Cheers, Victoria. Thank you.
You bet.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
What a phenomenal guest, folks. Wow, just heartbreaking. Some of the story. Many of you were crying as well. I could see in the chat. You said the story, the swimming pool. Oh my God. Honestly, it was like a sledgehammer to the head. But thank you for all the love and support that's come in. Please support Victoria. The website, the book links. If you're watching on replay, they're in the description box. I've just put them again in the live chat again. And just to let you guys know what we've got coming up tomorrow, we might have several shows tomorrow. It looks like Jay-Z's son, Rymia, is coming back for a part 4 at 6 p.m. It's been a while. It's going to be good to hear what he has to say. Then we've possibly got someone coming on about Princess Diana being unalived, the conspiracy. And then we've possibly got Kevin Annette coming on with an update. He wants to break it on our channel first, with an update on the case against the Pope. So lots more. It's going to be a big night tomorrow, folks. But yeah, please share this story and let's get it out there for Victoria. It's so important what she said. I mean, she just built up the early years and then just boom, sledgehammer. It was phenomenal, the journey she took us on, and such a fantastic speaker. So thanks for tuning in. Hope to see some of you in tomorrow's stream.